I'm Joe Bianca.
I'm Bill Finley.
I'm Jonathan Green.
I'm Alan Carasso.
Good morning. It is 10:05 Wednesday, October 21st. This is the TDN Writers Room presented by Keeneland. My name is Joe Bianca. I'm the associate editor of the Thoroughbred Daily News. Today's my mom's birthday. Yesterday was my dad's birthday. So happy birthday, guys. I got you the best gift you could ask for, a shout out on the TDN Writers Room.
I'm Bill Finley, a correspondent for the Thoroughbred Daily News, and happy birthday to Mr. and Mrs. Bianca.
Jonathan Green, general manager of DJ Stable. And I think that if all four of us were standing at stud in Kentucky, our stud fees would have gone up this year.
Again, John, way too hard to top that. So, bravo. I'm Alan Carasso, managing editor of TDN, and I promise you, I make a solemn vow that no matter the line of questioning, I will not leave this podcast early.
The TDN Writers Room is presented by Keeneland. A reminder that the Keeneland Fall Meet is still going on and goes through this Saturday, October 24th. We've got Keeneland November starting November 9th. 3,777 offerings plus supplementals. I'm sure there's going to be a good supplemental list with the Breeders Cup happening at Keeneland November 6th and 7th. Horses will already be stabled there. So we're looking forward to all that action, the online bidding, everything that has to do with the Breeders Cup. So best of luck to everybody at Keeneland in the next couple weeks. I know you guys will be busy. Okay, so slow news week, as we call it in the podcast biz. We don't have any major racing this week, and I think there's only 3 combined graded stakes from now until the Breeders' Cup, which is a nice little lull in terms of the workload, but in terms of things to talk about on the podcast, not quite as nice. But we thought we would go through the top divisional races pre-Breeders' Cup and kind of see where we are, see who the contenders are, see what their resumes look like head-to-head. Obviously, a lot is going to depend on the Breeders' Cup. I think more so in the juvenile races. That's usually the case with the juveniles having raced only half the year, if that. So I'm going to start with the horse of the year, and I think that'll be the most interesting one because, like I said before in the podcast, for the second straight year going into the Breeders' Cup, we don't really have a clear favorite for horse of the year, and there's a couple of different horses from different divisions that could possibly win it. So to me, I think there are 4 main contenders. I think you have Improbable, and then you have 3 3-year-olds, Swiss Skydiver, Tiz the Law, and Authentic. So I just want to go through their resumes real quick. I think, Tom's D'Etat looked like he could possibly be a horse of the year contender earlier in the year, but I just think he's only run 3 times. He doesn't have a grade 1 win. He was 3rd in the Clark. Or the Stephen Foster, or he won a Stephen Foster and then was 3rd in the Whitney, excuse me. So I think, I don't know, unless he wins the Classic by like 10 lengths and then wins the Clark, I think he's got a little too much to do. But let's talk Improbable. So Improbable was 2nd in the Oaklawn Mile to the aforementioned Tom's D'Etat, but then he's had 3 straight grade 1 wins, I think each more impressive than the one before that. He won the Gold Cup at Santa Anita. He won the Whitney at Saratoga. Now, he did get the benefit of Tom's D'Etat breaking slowly in the Whitney. So that's a tiny little bit of an asterisk there. But then he was completely dominant in the Awesome again. So as a personal fan of his, it's been great to see him blossom. So I think among the older horses, he's the clear leader. But then you have the 3-year-olds. You have Tiz the Law, who I think was the favorite earlier in the year with those 3 grade 1 wins. The Derby, he obviously wasn't disgraced. He ran 2nd. He did take a little bit of a chance passing on the Preakness, going to put all his eggs in the Breeders' Cup basket, but I think he's right there. And then Authentic had the Haskell win, the Derby win, close 2nd in the Preakness. So I think he's got as good of a resume, if maybe a slight tick below Tiz the Law. And then Swiss Skydiver, who I said I think would have a better case if she had won the Oaks, but nevertheless, she was 2nd in the Oaks. She won the Alabama. She won the Preakness, which is something very few fillies have done. And she's had a very good long campaign. Kenny McPeak made that point when he was on our show that if you like longevity, if you like horses that bounce around in different tracks, always take their racetrack with them. Don't take their racetrack with them. I think that she's the horse that you want for a long campaign to reward that kind of longevity. I'm going to toss it over to Bill and the rest of you guys and who you think is the leader right now and how you think stuff might shake up.
Well, the only thing I'd add to what you said, Joe, is I think Maximum Security is still in the mix as well. I know it's been a crazy up and down year for him and a lot has gone wrong. But if he were to win the Breeders' Cup Classic on top of the Pacific Classic, I think that would probably put him over the top. What do you do then with this Saudi Cup? To me, I just ignore it. And first of all, it didn't happen on U.S. soil. And secondly, we don't know if it's going to stand or not anyways. So you're spot on. The likelihood is that the Breeders' Cup Classic will determine Horse of the Year, except if it's won by a 20-1 shot type of thing. So just like you said, Improbable, Authentic, Tiz the Law. I think if any one of those three win the race, they're a deserving Horse of the Year. Oh, and Maximum Security as well, as I'm throwing him into the mix. But the wild card is Swiss Skydiver. What if she wins the distaff? Now, right now, Kenny McPeak has not said where she's going to go. But what if she wins the distaff? Looking at her body of work for the year, and I'm just saying, because I don't have an answer to this, I think it's just sort of a hypothetical. I'll throw this out for further discussion. Does that put her over the top, even over Improbable winning the Breeders' Cup Classic? Probably not, but you can make a pretty strong case for her that she should be Horse of the Year. Because again, it is Horse of the Year and everything we've talked about running, every month of the year pretty much, all the starts going around the country, et cetera. So she's in the mix as well as the other horses you said. Now, if she goes in the Breeders' Cup Classic and wins, which A, I don't think she's going to run the Breeders' Cup Classic, and B, I don't think she would win that race. She's obviously, as a unanimous Horse of the Year slam dunk type of thing.
Yeah, and Bill, you stole my thunder on Maximum Security because I know we've been kind of railing against him for since his test results came out from Saudi Arabia. But he has put in some good races. He knocked off some rust, and other than maybe you can say stubbing his toe, finishing second to Improbable last time out, he's run actually a very good campaign in 2020. So I'm not going to rehash what you guys said. One of the things that I thought about though is, in 2020 being that it's as Joe Bianca loves to say, a topsy-turvy kind of year, that, there were a lot of races that were lost. There were a lot of races that had to be postponed or, put later on in the calendar, and therefore didn't have the luster that some of these races have had in the past. What's to say that there's not a co-champion this year to, in essence, add value by having two horses of the year? So when those two horses either stand at stud or get retired, if it's a filly like Swiss Skydiver, that there's more value in the breed than there would have been if there was just one. Now, that's a big conspiracy theory that, voters would have to all come in together and basically get close. And then the powers that be would have to say, yeah, let's just call them co-champions. But I can see in this year where there's not a clear-cut winner. And if the Breeders' Cup Classic comes out to be like, Bill alluded to, a 20 or 30-1 shot wins, or it's a really, really close race between two horses and they nose each other out or they dead heat, I could see where there'd be a case for having co-champions this year.
The problem with going fourth here is you guys have all taken my salient points. I would say I've been a fan of Improbable since we made him a TDN Rising Star. It's not why I'm a fan of his, but he really showed me something last time out. I bet him at Saratoga, and I too was fortunate that Tom Stata didn't break that day. But I thought when he was so many lengths out of it last time, and with a horse like Maximum Security to run down, I really thought he was up against him. I thought he was out of his element. He's more forwardly placed typically, and I just thought he's going to have to do something special, and then he did. So, he's already won 1.25 miles this year, Grade 1 level. So, he's definitely got the bullseye on the back. I think he's the front runner. He's the leader in the clubhouse at this point. I think Swiss Skydiver, in order to be in the Horse of the Year conversation, would have to run in the Classic and win the Classic. I don't think a victory, even against older females, would tip the scales in her direction, in my mind, even with the Preakness win. So, but it'll be a good battle. And if nothing else, we get to settle it on the track this year, and that's probably a good thing at the end of the day.
Alan, since you always have to go fourth, do you want to go first and talk about a different race that intrigued you?
No, I'm good. You know, when I play blackjack, I sit at third base over here because I like to be last.
Right. Okay. Well, there you go. All
I'm
right.
good.
You're
good.
a cleanup hitter. That's the way I look at it.
So about Bill's point about maximum security and then John's weird thing about packing the horse of the year discussion. It depends on how much weight you put on the Saudi Cup, which we're going to get to with the distaff discussion as well, because, I think a lot of voters in the back of their mind, even though they're only technically supposed to consider races that were run in America, still have that win in the back of their mind. But the thing with maximum security is, first of all, he lost to Improbable on the square. If he does that in the Breeders' Cup again, I think he has no chance. But also, like the PR concern, I think, of having this horse who, like, previously had this controversial trainer. We got the FBI indictments and all that. I think that'll weigh on some people's minds too, that it might not be the best look in 2020 after all those bombshells to have him be the horse of the year. Obviously, if he goes and wins the Classic by 10 lengths, you got to do what you got to do. But I think, if it is a tie, I think there might be some people leaning another way out of concerns about how that might look. Bill, go ahead.
Well, can I respond to John's bizarre theory that there can be two horses of the year? John, what? Unless this election is rigged, and where have we heard that before? It's impossible. You can't. I think the only way to do it is if they would literally split the vote evenly, 155 to 155. I mean, it's a nice thought, or no, it's not a nice thought. It's just too wacky and way out there. First of all, there's no basis for it. We missed a few races earlier in the year. It's not like we missed the Breeders' Cup or the Triple Crown or anything like that. And there's no system of a way that the voting is done where that is even possible. So, John, thank you for thinking outside the box, but please come back down to planet Earth now.
Listen, it's not impossible. It is improbable, however. Okay. And that is the law.
Oh, boy.
Oh, man. He really came to play with this slow news week. I gotta tip my hat to John.
Thank you.
All right, so I wanted to segue from that into the older filly and mare discussion, because I think it's pretty much down to two horses, because we have so many great 3-year-old fillies. That's a little bit more interesting. We're going to talk about that as well, although Swiss Skydiver probably has it locked up. Monomoy Girl, I think it's interesting that she, earlier in the year, she hadn't run until the end of May, and then has one Grade 1 win, has run 3 times total. And I got to think that she's the heavy favorite right now. Obviously, if she wins the distaff, that's going to lock it up for her. But, Midnight Bisou, with the second in the Saudi Cup, came back with a romp in the Fleur-de-Lis. Looked like she was on her way about 3-5 to win her second straight older filly or mare trophy. Then second in the Personal Ensign, obviously only lost by a neck, but still did not get the job done with no visible excuse, and then had to retire. So I think that Monomoy Girl's connections, in addition to throwing darts at a dartboard that looks like John Green, have to be very happy that Midnight Bisou kind of left the table open for them the rest of the way. And, obviously if she wins the Breeders' Cup Classic, this is not even a discussion, but you guys think there's any way, if she bombs in the Breeders' Cup, that Midnight Bisou could still sneak in the back door and win that trophy?
My answer would be probably not. And, I do agree that Monomoy Girl will have made 4 starts this year. And normally, do you want to reward a horse for making 4 starts? No, but this is what, modern racing has turned into in 2020. And as you said, if she wins the Breeders' Cup Distaff, there's no debate whatsoever. But, if you take Midnight Bisou's campaign, back to the question, what do you do with the Saudi Cup? Does it count? Does running second, what does that do for you when you consider the voting? Now, remember, even if she's going to eventually be declared the winner, it's not going to happen by the time the Eclipse Award ballots are out. It's pretty clear from what the Saudis have said about the race. So, I would lean towards Monomoy Girl no matter what happened, unless, somebody who's done something relevant during the year wins the Breeders' Cup Distaff by 6-7 lengths. I just think that, Joe, whether it's fair or not, I think Midnight Bisou is sort of out of sight, out of mind right now.
I do want to mention the other horse that does have the other horses that do have Grade 1 wins that are older filly and mares was Vexatious, won the Personal Ensign, and then Cece, who won the Apple Blossom. I believe those are the only other Grade 1 winners for older fillies and mares on dirt. So I wouldn't completely rule them out if they win the Classic. But yeah, Monomoy Girl, especially with her popularity too. I think she's just such a popular horse across the industry, and it has to extend to voters. I think she's probably 2 to 5 right now to win that division. All right, so just going to run down a couple of these other divisions real quick. Turf division, it didn't seem to have a leader for most of the year, but I think now we do have a pretty clear leader in the 8-year-old, soon to be 9-year-old Channel Maker, a horse who had gone a while without drinks and then wired the Sword Dancer by several lengths, did the same thing in the Joe Hirsch. So I think it's kind of his race to lose now for champion turf horse. He does have a history of running poorly in the Breeders' Cup, so it's going to be interesting if he can correct that. So in that division, I feel like it's a little bit underwhelming right now, but it would be cool to see an 8-year-old win the whole thing. And then for the older filly and mare turf horse, I think you have to consider Rushing Fall a favorite. Just her resume is just impeccable. She does have multiple Grade 1 wins this year. She set the course record in the Jenny Wiley, won the Diana, was the 3rd fastest Diana of all time. She did only beat Mean Mary by a neck. I assume that Mean Mary is going to be back in the filly and mare turf, while Rushing Fall might either go to the mile or the filly and mare turf. But I think she is a pretty heavy favorite right now, especially since Sister Charlie has come back and not looked like herself this year. Run a couple of thirds. The sprinters are interesting. The filly and mare sprinter, and then the male sprinter. I think for male sprinter, Vekoma, if he goes to the dirt mile, I think is going to kind of, I don't know if he's going to screw himself in that division, because I think most people will still give him bonus points if he wins that race. But he won't be taking on the best 6 furlong horses in America if he does that. He's more of a miler type, even though he did win the Carter at 7 furlongs. But I'm going to toss it to John, because he seems to have a few ideas about the filly and mare sprint division.
Well, just that I think top to bottom, that's going to be one of the most interesting races that are out there. You're talking about, a couple of 3-year-olds that have, really come up the ranks, and a couple of older horses that have realized maybe going 6 furlongs, 7 furlongs is probably, their cup of tea. Starting in no particular order, but Serengeti Empress and Gamine come to mind as far as horses that have done well going 2 turns, but certainly prefer going shorter. Then Venetian Harbor, Frank's Rocket, who just, ran through the wind up in New York this last weekend. Bellafina, who, just every year it seems like that she's here, come Breeders' Cup time. And the list goes on and on. To me, that's going to be the most intriguing race because there's 4 or 5 or maybe even half a dozen fillies and mares that you can make a case for to win that race. And I think when we look back at that race, we'll say, oh yeah, that was the horse that made the most sense, based on the fact that they were, trending towards victory in the filly and mare sprint division. So for me, that's even a more intriguing race than all the others, except for maybe, save the Classic.
I think, going back to, I agree with that. And I think that Serengeti Empress, if she wins the filly and mare sprint, is going to be head and shoulders above everybody else. I think she just runs so well this year at so many different distances. I think she's going to get a lot of credit for that. Back to the male sprinters for a second. It's interesting because Complexity is a horse that I think has the most talent out of any horse going a mile or shorter in this country. The problem is, he did not win the Forego. He was second. He ran well in there, but did not get the job done. And then his big win was in the Kelso going a mile. So I assume he's going to end up in the dirt mile. I assume he's going to be favored in that, but it's just an interesting discussion about, how you consider these dirt milers in terms of the sprint division when they do have sprinting races in their past performances, may have run well, may not have won. Do you give them, do you drop them down into that category? Or do you, lean towards a horse who's run at these traditional 6-7 furlong distances the whole year? Because I don't know, I don't see that cracked sprinter this year that has just torn things up going 6 furlongs. I mean, Forense Fires had a couple of great races, but there's nobody that's like Matoli last year. Matoli was obviously a no-brainer because in addition to the Met Mile, he had run at 6-7 furlongs and run great and won these races. This year, there's no real horse like that. The best sprinters are probably going to be running in the dirt mile. So that's going to be an interesting discussion come Eclipse Award time as well.
Yeah, Joe, the only exception to that, I would say, is Nashville. who may not even get voted into the race, being that he's still technically a 2 other than. But as far as horses on, rising and running huge numbers, we talked about it last week in great length, that he's a horse that I think if he's allowed into the sprint, immediately becomes one of the candidates of favoritism, for that race.
And there's Yapon as well. I think everybody's forgetting Yapon. He's run some massive races, still undefeated. And, speaking of Matoli, you've got the same connections and all of that. So I think he's definitely in there with a big shout.
And the Turf Sprint, I think it's going to be a really interesting match race between Get Stormy, cutting back and running against the boys, and Infamous, who's trained by our friend Joe Orsino, who won the Win in Your In race at Kentucky Downs a couple of weeks ago. That they kind of go to the head of the class in that sprint division as well. But it's interesting in this year of it being so weird and wacky. How about all these fillies that are running against the top contenders in their respective fields? I mean, Get Stormy and Swiss Skydiver and a couple of the fillies that are running against the boys in the turf. I mean, it's really, I think when we sit down and look at the entries in about a week and a half, we're going to be surprised that there are all these fillies that are taking on the respective boys in their respective divisions. And I know we have Wesley Ward coming on later on for an interview. That's one of the questions I'm going to have for him, because he, systematically has done it over the past couple of years, especially with his young horses, taking young 2-year-old fillies and running them against the boys at the highest levels.
We'll be right back after this message from Keeneland. The only question I think, the Juvenile Fillies, I think, is going to come down to the race, to the actual Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies, the Juvenile Filly race. But the Juvenile Male race, I don't know. Do we think that Jackie's Warrior could lose the Breeders' Cup and still win the division? I mean, he has the multiple Grade 1 wins. Nobody else has that. Obviously, it's going to depend on who wins the Juvenile. If he loses, I think if Essential Quality wins, probably going to be champion. Get Her Number, I don't know. His races before the American Pharaoh were not that great. But I think, usually in the juvenile races, the Breeders' Cup determines everything. I think there's at least a chance that Jackie's Warrior could not win the juvenile and still win the Eclipse Award. What do you guys think?
Well, yeah, I agree with you, Joe. But then it comes down to who wins the juvenile. If it's one of the horses that won a major prep or Grade 1 coming in, yeah, they would jump over Jackie's Warrior. But what if, again, it's the proverbial 25-1 shot that just ran fourth in something or other? Then you probably would go back to Jackie's Warrior based on that. And I want to bring up one other horse that when we were doing the discussions of various divisions that completely got overlooked. How about Uni? I think the Filly and Mayor Turf division just could come down to whichever Chad Brown horse does the best. And, I agree that Rushing Fall is kind of in the driver's seat right now. But if Uni comes back and wins the Breeders' Cup Mile 2 years in a row and has that win at Keeneland in the First Lady on her resume as well, there's a horse that, was easy to write off just a couple of weeks ago, but she's definitely in the mix as well for that division. Matter of fact, I think a win in there, it depends. And then if Rushing Fall were to win the Filly and Mayor Turf, that would make it kind of difficult. But, that division is always, or seemingly always, just comes down to which Chad Brown horse has the best day at the Breeders' Cup.
Yeah, and I got to admit that I'm pulling for Rushing Fall. For a horse who's run from 2 to 5, has 6 Grade 1 wins, has won Grade 1 wins at 2, 3, 4, and 5, but has never won an Eclipse Award trophy. I think that I got to be pulling for her as, even if she doesn't show up in the Breeders' Cup, as kind of a lifetime achievement award. So the Video Vanguard, as we used to have on the VMAs. We can give that to Rushing Fall, even if she doesn't win the Breeders' Cup. But yeah, Uni, if she does come back and win the mile again, she certainly has a good shot. The New York Racetrack Chaplaincy Christmas Drive is now underway. A great chance to support all of the backstretch families. New York Racetrack Chaplaincy and the Racetrack Chaplaincy of America do a great job. Listen to why Michael Dubb will be sponsoring a family this Christmas.
In my time around the backstretch, it's been apparent to me that the backstretch chaplaincy is really part of the backbone of the racetrack. And what they do for people, the care, there are no bounds, no limits to what they will do for the people of the backstretch in terms of improving their quality of life. And I fully intend to support their Christmas charity and their pledge and to support a family.
Owning multiple graded stakes winning racehorses like Hard Not to Love and Decorated Invader is attainable with a partnership like West Point Thoroughbreds. Partnerships enable you to spread your ownership across several horses for less than it costs to own one horse alone. This increases your racetrack action and chances for a big horse. Learn more about why West Point Thoroughbreds is the gold standard in racing partnerships at westpointtb.com. So overall, a slow news week, but there's been a development in the past week or two with the stud fees for 2021 coming out that I think is worth talking about, especially with a guy like John, who's involved in the business at the breeding level and the auction level. We had the stud fees of Warfront and Medaglia d'Oro, where the big headliners cut. Medaglia d'Oro was standing at $200,000. Warfront was standing at $250,000, and those both dropped down to $150,000, which is a pretty big cut, especially in Warfront's case. Before he was the highest, he had the highest advertised stud fee in America. We don't know what American Pharaohs is, but in terms of advertised stud fees, he was the king. Now that's Into Mischief. And it's a funny thing because when Spendthrift announced Into Mischief stud fee for 2021, they went up to $225,000. I thought that was honestly a little low. I thought that he could have gone higher, especially with having so many top contenders in the Breeders' Cup. But now that the rest of the fees have come out, I can kind of understand why they didn't go higher than they did, because I got to give a shout out to a lot of these breeding farms. And listen, the cynical read of this is that they know what's going on in the economy. They know the economy is reeling from COVID. They're just pricing the horses based on what they think the market will allow. But at the same time, I do think that there's a lot of cooperation in this case, like we saw earlier in the year with the sales companies cooperating and organizing their schedules around each other and collaborating. I think there is some of that where a lot of people know in the stallion business that the breeders, they feed the beast. And if the breeders can't afford to come see your horses in the middle of a teetering economy, then that's the industry does not go forward. So I got to give a lot of credit to a lot of people at Darley, Lane's End, all these stud farms who have released reduced fees. Darley released theirs yesterday. Everybody's down except for Nyquist. Nyquist, obviously capitalizing on a tremendous first crop success year, is up to $75,000 from $40,000, but everyone else is cut. And the Medaglia d'Oro cut's big. Claiborne did the same thing, not forgetting anybody. I think everybody is kind of on this same page. I'm going to toss it to John for his impressions, but I think that there is deserved kudos here for a lot of these stud farms, recognizing the reality of breeders and still making it work.
I'm glad to see that the industry is taking this decisive action when it comes to stud fees. And just to give you, some comparison to previous years, some context, over the past 3 years, the average number of stallions that have increased their stud fee is about 17. So roughly, and there's about roughly 200 stallions that stand in Kentucky for $5,000 or more. So roughly 10% of the stallions year to year go up in value. Like I said, about 17 over the past 3 years. This year, with not all the farms announcing yet, but the majority of them have announced, their stud fees. There's only 5 so far that have gone up in value. And Joe, you mentioned Into Mischief, who went up, and deservedly so. He's the top rated stallion in the country. But then the other 4 are Constitution. Again, you can make a very good case for that with Tiz the Law, Independence Hall, Gouverneur Morris, et cetera, et cetera. He had a very, very good first year. And he is the top second year stallion. And then 3 freshman sires that are up in value. Not this time. Nyquist, as you mentioned, and Leoban, who was standing in New York. So the thing that shocked me the most wasn't that there were, it went from 17 horses that went up in value on an average year to 5, but rather of the group of 5, only 1 horse, Into Mischief, can be considered a proven stallion. Everyone else is either the top second year stallion in Constitution or freshman sires. So what does that tell you about the industry? It tells you that you have to strike immediately in order to make it as a stallion. Otherwise, you're going to be at best in limbo, and at worst shipped off to Korea or Turkey, or have your stud fees reduced. And when you look at the stallions whose stud fees have been announced that have been reduced, it's really jarring. It's the top of the industry. Tappet, who was the third rated stallion in the country, has been decreased, as has Hardspun, who's 12th, Street Sense 13th, Malibu Moon 18th, Medaglia de Oro 25th, and as you mentioned, Warfront 26th. So 6 of the top 25 stallions in the industry are reduced stud fees this year. And then some unproven ones: Frosted, Gun Runner, Omaha Beach, Matoli, and Vino Rosso. Again, just to take a couple of examples. And those last 3, they just entered stud last year. So they don't even have, foals in sales yet. And already the farms are recognizing that there's going to be a real dearth of breeders overall. And they're immediately taking a proactive approach and reducing stud fees. I can't remember in my history in the industry of such a drastic, immediate change, not only at the top of the industry, but with new sires as well, as far as, the swiftness that these farms are recognizing that they're just not going to be able to demand and command the kind of stud fees that they have in the past. So on the one hand, it's great that the farms in the industry are recognizing this. On the other hand, I think it really is a warning bell to the industry about where we're going economically. And this is on the heels of the 4th straight year where we've had less foals born than the previous year. It's a concern.
I mean, it's a business, and you have to be reactive or proactive in this case, and you have to make it as possible as you can for your customers to make a profit and look out for them and do what's best by them. In the cases of horses like Not This Time and Nyquist, they've earned the right to see their stud fees go to be increased. In the case of Not This Time, from 12.5 to 40,000, he's done it on the track with Princess Noor, who I think is really interesting. I'll be curious to see how the bettors treat her at Keeneland, but she's done it on the track, and she obviously set an OBS record, 1,350,000. So he's proved to be commercial as well, and is deserving of that 3 times hike in his stud fee. Same for Nyquist with the 2 Grade 1 winners. I think the stat is that no sire since Danzig has had 2 Grade 1 winners this early in their career. Again, he's been very commercial. His progeny even this year have been well received at auction, and they are deserving of the stud fee hikes. And the breeders who elect to breed to them have every chance to get a good return for their buck. So it's definitely interesting times.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of value to be had now, especially if you're shopping on a stallion roster and you tend to go towards the bottom tier at that roster anyway. I think there are horses that might have been in the middle tier before that are now in the bottom tier that you can probably afford better. So I think it's a good thing for the industry at large, and it's a good thing for breeders. It's a tough time right now for sure, but I can't help. Maybe I'm a softie. I can't help but be heartened by the idea that people are at least kind of looking out for each other in this way. That they know that this is something that we all have to get through together. Like this ship can't sink. We gotta we kind of gotta make it profitable as best we can for everybody along the line, except for bettors. We'll never cut takeout anyway. But John, I wanted to ask you about, have you seen something like this before in the industry? I don't know whether it was the 2008 recession, or have you seen, stallion farms and studs become less valuable and then rebound in a couple of years when the economy rebounds?
Yeah, Joe, you hit the nail on the head. It was during the recession. It was actually 2009 into 2010. I think in 2008, in 07 and 2008, everyone kind of like put their head in the sand and said, well, that's okay, but there's still rich people that'll pay, X number of dollars to breed to my horse. And then they realized that they weren't getting that kind of traffic. So they did a lot of foal shares and a lot of mare shares to try to keep, the stud fees of their top stallions artificially propped up. I think this year everyone looked in the mirror and said, you know what, that wasn't a good system. That didn't work out well. I'm just going to go ahead and get ahead of the curve and start, slashing now. So if you liked breeding to, tap it at $200,000 a couple of years ago, you're going to love breeding to them at a 40% discount this year. The same thing holds true with, some of these great stallions. I mean, the reduction on Tappet and Medaglia d'Oro and Malibu Moon and Warfront isn't because they're not having good years. It's because they're not having phenomenal years like Into Mischief, but they're still really good stallions and they're still sires of sire. And I'm curious to see, Uncle Mo is one of the top stallions that the farm hasn't announced stud fee yet. And it's not that, in my estimation, it's not that Uncle Mo doesn't have a great horse in the Breeders' Cup this year. I think it's because people are looking at Uncle Mo as a sire of sires now. And we've talked about it a couple of times on this show. He's 12 turning 13, and already he's got the moniker of being a producer of sires. And I think that's going to keep his numbers up, even if his foals don't necessarily earn the same kind of money that some of these other stallions progeny are doing. But 07, 08, 09, I think was the last time when you saw, the latter part of that period, when you saw farms being proactive about reducing stud fees. I think now they're just trying to get out in front of it. But the thing that's really concerning is the young sires, more so than anything else. You're given one crop, basically, to show if you can do it or not. And if you can't, you're in the discount rack. And it's really unfair in my estimation that the marketplace does that. I think part of the reason why is, and Bill, you'll appreciate this, part of the reason why they're giving them a one and done year situation is because so many horses are retiring off the racetrack early that there's just a constant inflow of new sires to kind of take their place, which again kind of goes into a negative cycle on the industry of people retiring horses early to fill the needs and kind of take the money, when it's offered by the stud farms, because the previous year's top recruits are, being left, behind if they don't have great, graded stake winners in their first crop.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about that in the past about just everybody can't be a stallion. You can't have every horse that wins a grade 1 or a grade 2 become a stallion. It's just, that's not the reality of the business. And I think it's a good point, John. And we've spoken about this on the show before. Daredevil is a great example. A horse that, was sent to Turkey and, he basically had like one so-so crop of horses on the track and now might have a horse of the year. It definitely has a champion 3-year-old filly. So, yeah, that's an interesting discussion as well. So yeah, I mean, this is a tough period for everybody. I don't think we need more stallions. I think if we can kind of have people lean towards keeping the horses on the track, at least for another year or two, especially with declining foal crops, I think, the business kind of has to lean in that direction again. And that's a different topic for a different day, because a lot of people are, breeding for sales. They want to see the big sales prices. And then, if that doesn't work out and then the horse has a slow first year on the track, then, really they're 3 years in, to a lot of people if they don't have great sales success and then don't have great racetrack success. But that's another topic for another day. But overall, it's a good thing that these stallion farms are reducing prices, and I'm sure a lot of breeders appreciate it. So it's good on them. Joining a West Point Thoroughbreds partnership can vault you into the world of instant camaraderie among people surrounding high-class horses and stakes action for a fraction of the cost of trying to do it on your own. Learn more at westpointtv.com. We'll be right back after this message from West Point Thoroughbreds. So Bill had some interesting thoughts in his weekend review column this week on Monday. It's about a couple of things, but it's about sports betting now being here for a little while and its effect on handle. Because when we first heard the news of sports betting being legalized, I think we all reasonably thought that this is going to take a big chunk out of horse racing handle, especially with the online wagering, because online betting is something that horse racing has had a domain over for a long time. They've been the only game in town And, sports betting is not online everywhere yet, but it's going to be. But so far, the handle trends this year are surprisingly positive. Now, even irrespective of the sports betting factor, I think that's an interesting discussion, because we assumed with the coronavirus and the pandemic and the economy and all that handle would take a huge hit, and that hasn't been the case so far. But I'll lead to Bill now about his story in sports betting, and then we can circle back to all the factors.
Yeah, Joe, I mean, the question is, how much is sports betting going to hurt horse racing? It's going to hurt horse racing. It's just a matter of how much. And right now, I think the answer is to be determined. And when I started, I had this idea. It came out because in September, New Jersey set a record for most handle on sports betting in a single month, eclipsing Nevada, eclipsing any other records that ever set, is $743 million. And the numbers are just going through the roof. We've got 18 states right now. Pretty soon it's going to be 30. It's getting more and more popular all the time. So the question is, where's this money coming from? And is some of it coming from horse racing? And surprisingly so, and I know we don't have a whole lot of data to work with, but in 2019, through the first 9 months, the horse racing handle, all things considered, because of the coronavirus, I think is doing outstanding to only be down about 2.8%. Now, in September, the month where so much was bet sports wagering in New Jersey, during that month, pari-mutuel handle was up 29%. Now, it is a little bit misleading because the Kentucky Derby, for the first time in history, was run in September rather than May. So I think the jury's still out on this. I would guess, though, that this is a tsunami still to come for horse racing. And how could it not be? So as you said, entering into 2-3 years ago, horse racing was the only game in town so far as online betting. Now you can bet on online sports in all these states. It's soon going to be many more states to come. How can it not negatively affect horse racing? And the difference between slot machines and casinos, horse racing got a portion of that revenue. They made a deal with the devil, and every time you lose $20 in a slot machine at parks, some of that money goes to horse racing. By and large, none of the sports betting money is going to go to horse racing. There's a couple little different pockets here and there where the story's not quite that simple. So I think it's to be determined. I'm still kind of pessimistic about this so far as the impact it's going to have on horse racing. I just don't see how it can't have an effect on horse racing, and a pretty severe effect.
Bill, one of the things I thought was really interesting in the article was just how you compared the average takeout of an average race bet at the racetrack versus if somebody bets on a football game at Monmouth Park. Can you get into that a little bit?
Yeah, John, that's a good point. And they are different products, but they're still gambling. You're still selling the same thing. So if you go to the grocery store and you want to buy tomatoes and they cost 50 cents more at the A&P than they do at ShopRite, where are you going to buy your tomatoes in the future? So basically the takeout on a horse bet is about 20%. And I'm not sure I got the math right about this, because I don't know the first thing about sports betting. I've never gambled on my life, but I believe the takeout on sports betting is about 9%. But whatever it is, it's much lower than the takeout on horse racing. So, how is horse racing going to compete with a similar gambling product that's priced much lower? And really, it's the same story with all gambling products. With the exception of the lottery, horse racing is far and away the most expensive thing to bet on of anything that's offered in North America. And so, people in horse racing sometimes think that doesn't matter. It does matter. So how would you deal with this, and how would you right the ship? Well, the answer is to lower the takeout. But we all know that's never going to happen. Matter of fact, we hope that the takeout doesn't continue to go up in various places. So, that's one more reason why people, I think, are going to start to gravitate more towards sports betting than to horse betting. For me, I would never do that. I'm interested in one. I'm not interested in the other. But how many people out there are somewhat interested in both and will choose the cheaper product? Again, it's you're selling something, and the price of what you sell something for does matter. Another analogy: if there's two gas stations on a corner, one selling gas for $2.25 a gallon, the other selling it for $2.06 a gallon, what gas station are you going to go to? That's just common sense. But we could have this discussion till we're blue in the face and be talking about it 10 years from now. Yes, the takeout should be dropped. No, it's never going to happen.
Yeah, and Bill, just to continue with your analogy, what about if you pull up to the pump of that gas station thinking it's going to be $2.10, and then as you're in the process of filling your tank, the price goes up to $3?
Yeah, John, thanks for bringing that up. And, that's another problem that I think that the consumer would by and large, so much prefer fixed odds. Now, the fixed odds are very simple in a sports bet. It's basically 11 to 10. So if you bet on a football game on Sunday, you got to bet $11 to win 10. Imagine if in the middle of, so you gave the example, you bet on the Jets. Why anybody would bet on the Jets, I have no idea, because they stink. But suppose you bet on the Jets plus 12, and then you go into the second half and they're winning the game by 10 points. Then all of a sudden they say, oh, by the way, you're not going to win the $10 on the $11 bet. We changed our mind. You're only going to win $8. I mean, there would be mutiny. I mean, people would be just going irate. And look what's happened and more all the time in parimutuel betting. Now, I know it is not fixed odds and it flows, but, when you see this pattern over and over and over again, it seems to get worse all the time, where you literally see horses at 5 to 1 going into the gate. They get out front by 3 lengths and they're 5 to 2. So who is going to, when you have the opportunity to have fixed odds, that's so much of a better, more stable bet. And you don't have that opportunity to just get pissed off when you actually have a winner. Now, Monmouth Park is looking to go with fixed odds wagering. It was supposed to happen this year. It didn't. Let's see how popular that is. I mean, I think that's, especially with sports betting out there, that's definitely something that this industry needs to take a cold hard look at, the fixed odds wagering component.
I mean, I agree with that. I think, the death of Betfair does not bode well for how fixed odds wagering is going to go in America, especially if it's localized like it would be at Monmouth. So not too confident about that, but I agree that it has to be part of the solution. It has to be part of the business. It has to at least be an option because of the things that you articulated. I think also, younger, more sophisticated bettors are even more price sensitive than older bettors. And I think that that's a big problem too, in terms of cultivating a new generation of horse bettors, which it seems like a lot of times this industry has kind of just thrown their hands up and given up on, which is unfortunate because there's no future of the sport without, new money in the pools. But with that being said, what do you guys, I'll toss it to Alan here because he hasn't been able to chime in, but why is horse racing betting only down 2.6% this year? I mean, September, you could point to the big handle numbers. We had the Derby in September, but overall in the year, like we're pretty much almost where we were last year. And, we still have the Breeders' Cup. There could be a strong couple of wagering days there. So I can't explain it, that we seem to be hemorrhaging bettors and, takeouts too high and all these problems. But yet, is it just because people are bored? Is it just because people are looking for something to do, looking for something to bet on? It's fascinating to me that we haven't had this handle plunge this year, as you would, reasonably assume there would be.
Yeah. Bill, I would defer to you on that if you want to take that.
Yeah, I mean, I'll take it, Joe. I don't have the answer. You bring up very good points here. And at the very least, it's good news for horse racing. The only other thing I would say as an aside, though, that even though the betting is fairly comparable to last year, so much less money is going to purses now because it's all coming from ADWs, and ADWs take the bulk of all the money. Whereas, I know on-track business isn't a huge part of horse racing, but it is, at Saratoga, it is at Del Mar. And so the contribution from gambling to purses has been cut this year, which is one of the reasons why purses are down quite a bit. But Joe, the only thing I can think of is, at least vis-a-vis the sports betting thing, is that maybe there's not a lot of crossover. Maybe horse bettors are not interested in sports and sports bettors are not interested in horse racing. But all these questions that you raise, I mean, we're not going to really be able to answer them until 4 or 5 years down the line. But horse racing should be extremely happy that the numbers have been as good as they are. If we would have said in February, before anybody knew what the hell was going to happen, if you had had the coronavirus virtually wipe out 3 months of racing, have sports betting come in, you would have predicted that the handle in horse racing would be down 25-30% this year, that it's not as remarkable. And why? I don't have the answer, other than it is good news.
So maybe this is oversimplifying it. I am a horse player only. I don't bet sports, and there's a reason for that. It's because I stink. However, from a layperson standpoint, why don't we tell the sports bettor, the one that's betting $11 to win 10 straight up, that they can make 2 or 5 or 15 or 20 or 30 to 1 on a straight win bet, or they could bet 3 races in a row, spread, spend a little bit of money, and they can make something like 20 or 30 or 100 to 1, as opposed to the 15 or 20 to 1 they get if they're lucky enough to pick the winners of 6 NFL games on a given weekend. So I think that, that somehow if we could get in the brains of the pure sports bettor and say, here's an attractive option. It's not blackjack where you get even money, or 3-2 if you're lucky, or double your money. It's not, it's not craps where we do give you odds, but like 9-5 is the best you can do. Why don't we say, hey, take horse racing for a spin? I just think there's a bit of an opportunity there that we've never really explored.
Yeah, I think horizontal wagering in particular is like kind of the only area where we can sell, I think, a better priced product to the sports bettor, because you only have, even though the takeout is nominally higher, you only have to pay that takeout once through 4, 5, 6 races. Whereas if you bet a parlay, you're paying that vig every single game that's in the ticket. So I think that's the one area I agree with you 100%, Al, that I think you could potentially maybe make some inroads if you could actually explain it and market it to people, which is not our industry's strong suit. Just one other thing I wanted to mention from Bill's story. Alex Waldrop mentioned that, it's going to be key when sports betting does become a bigger part of the online market, that we are on those same platforms, just at least as an option. You're not going to be on the front page anymore as you are on the ADWs, but just to at least be part of that and to get some of that trickle down action, I think is going to be huge. And I don't know, Bill, it doesn't seem like that is a lock. It seems like something that we're going to have to work to get into those platforms.
Yeah, what Alex was talking about is everything being from quote unquote the same wallet. And I've had other people explain this to me as well. So suppose you go to betonstuff.com. Right now, you would only be able to bet on sports. But suppose that you could bet on sports, you could bet on horse racing, you can even bet on casino games. I mean, in New Jersey and other states now, you can bet on blackjack online, to put it all in that same avenue. So that would definitely be help. I mean, again, if you go into a casino in Las Vegas, it's not that you can only bet on sports. You can't bet on horse racing. You can. So if racing could do that, that's certainly going to help. And I guess at the same token, you might say that the ADWs would have a right to raise their hand and say, hey, wait a minute, we want to have sports betting on. So you go to Twin Spires or Express Bet or whatever, as well as betting the 4th at Santa Anita. You can bet on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers game type of thing. So, that's something I know they're working on behind the scenes and trying to get. But I guess, what is in it for the online sports betting world? I don't know. I don't know how much of incentive they have to do that. Maybe they do. But that's certainly something that would certainly help make it easier for horse racing to get some crossover money with the sports bettor.
The Green Group Guest of the Week is sponsored by The Green Group, an accounting, tax consulting, and advisory firm specializing in the thoroughbred industry. With over 500 clients in the horse business, they have proven strategies to save you taxes. Learn more about how they can help you at www.greenco.com. Our Green Group Guest of the Week this week is the man with the 2-year-olds, the 2-year-old contingent heading into the Breeders' Cup, Wesley Ward. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me on, Joe.
Great to have you. So you have a ton of 2-year-olds, as is usually your norm, really power-packed stable there. I wanted to ask about one in particular to start. Golden Pal, the son of Uncle Mo, first full out of Lady Shipman. Obviously remember her as a great turf sprinter. I kind of wanted to know, first of all, how you got in touch with Randall Lowe of Randall Lowe Investments to get to train that colt, and then how he has matched up to your expectations of him.
Well, it goes kind of a long ways back when he had the mare, Lady Shipman. He'd reached out and called me if I was interested in training, and it just didn't come to fruition. His ultimate pick was Kieran McLaughlin. But then when he had this colt in the sale, I had kind of followed her career and was a big fan of hers because she's so fast and she's a turf sprinter. That I went and seen the colt in the sale, and I loved him. He was my pick of the sale last year at the Keeneland September sale. And so he was there when the horse was selling, and we had a minor issue where we tried to buy the horse for Coolmore, and we had a couple months to for them to take possession, but to see if he could get over the minor issue he had. And unfortunately, it's a minor thing that he was born with. And he has that issue today, and he didn't pass the vet. So being as I put a couple months in on the horse, he sent him back to Ocala to give him a little bit of time off from the breaking. And right around the first of the year, I called him back and I said, look, I'd still be really, really interested in training the colt for you. And he thought about it for a couple of weeks, and then he sent him up to Keeneland, and we've had him ever since. And he's just been a joy to train. I'm a big fan of the colt. And so I'm looking forward to Breeders' Cup.
Hey, Wesley, it's Bill Finley, and thanks for joining us. And let's turn the page to one of your other big stars for the Breeders' Cup, Campanelle. Here's a horse that's already won a Group 1 against the boys in Europe Prix Morny, also won the Queen Mary before that. So she's not that familiar to U.S. racing fans because she's only run here once at Gulfstream. So just talk about her campaign, why you decided to race her, not just once at Ascot, but twice in Europe, and just your thoughts on her coming into the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies Turf.
She's a little different than the horses that I brought to Ascot and to the Morny in years past. She's got a big, long stride, and she's fast. So my thought always going into the Morny was that she would go a mile, even though she has a sprinter's pedigree. She's a big filly, and with that long stride, I took the blinkers off going into the Morny to sort of help her to stretch her speed for this particular race. And it was fortunate. We were lucky. She ran a big race that day with Frankie up, and she got right back here to Keeneland. And ever since then, even before the Morny, this was the plan, was this particular race.
And Wesley, it's Jonathan Green. We've been going over your stats before our interview, and it's amazing. You have over 1,900 victories as a trainer, which is quite an accomplishment. You've been averaging about 9 wins a month over the past couple of years, which, if you project forward, that means that you'll probably get your 2,000th victory as a trainer sometime in May or June of 2021. Do you want it to be your 2,000th win? Do you want it to be the Kentucky Derby, the Preakness, a win at Royal Ascot, or a 2-year-old maiden special weight? What do you think is going to be your 2,000th victory?
I'll take a 2,000 at Keeneland in the spring. That'll be all right with me.
the 2,000 at Keeneland in the spring. Did you buy a yearling, or do you have a yearling in your program you think is going to be that horse?
I hope so. I've also bred a bunch of them, so that's kind of like my hobby, is breeding these horses. I've got quite a few brood mares, and so excited about my prospects, along with the ones that we bought at the sales and that other clients have gave me to train.
Wesley, Alan Carasso, thanks for joining us. I wanted to ask you about Bound for Nowhere. I saw a tweet from Francis Caron, I think yesterday, that said he'd been kicked out for some R&R, and he's run so well at Keeneland when you sprinted him. Can you just update us on him? What's the plan for him going forward? Will he stay in training at 7 next year? And just give us a little Bound for Nowhere update.
He's kind of been a project of mine since day one. He's very lightly raced, but he's won nearly half his races, and I only got to run him a couple times this year. But to me, he just, moving forward, he just wasn't putting in the same effort in the mornings in his workout. Sometimes he can be deceiving, as his rider that rides him and works him in the morning, Julio Garcia, can be as well. He kind of gets him to where he just relaxes so much. But I had a friend of mine, Robbie Alvarado, come over to breeze him and took Julio Garcia off just to really get a good feel of what he is. And he kind of asked him a little bit down the lane in his last work. And to me, visually, it wasn't the same horse. Something internally was bothering him, nothing that we could see with the veterinarians. And so I just decided to give him a couple more months, and unfortunately had to forego the Breeders' Cup here at his home track. But I didn't feel he'd give 110% like he usually does. So I just sort of erred on the side of caution and kicked him out in the paddock, and we'll try him again next year.
I wanted to kind of follow up on Campanelle, who Bill asked about. She was a 190,000 guineas Tattersalls October purchase. Now, we've seen in the past couple of years, Chad Brown has started to shop overseas a little bit more and add to his barn that way. She obviously has worked out for you. Do you think that's something that you could, incorporate more into your program going forward, is shopping overseas?
Ben McElroy is a great talent in picking the horses out. He's the one that bought this filly and was very high on her from immediately after he bought her, he called me. Barbara Banky gave him a real good chance to go over there to buy our horse, and he came through for it that could possibly win it at Royal Ascot. And, hopefully this continues along with winning there. As you know, as we talked about earlier, she won in France, and Barbara, she really kind of gets excited by winning these races in Europe. So, which is good for me anyways. But, I think he's got some new prospects he bought for her again this year. And so, yeah, I welcome any especially the talented ones that come over here. And then, you kind of really get a good chance to see them somewhere around January or February. Just by galloping them, you can really see which ones are kind of starting to separate themselves.
Hey, Wesley, I see that your team getting horses ready for the Breeders' Cup will not only be your usual crew of exercise riders, grooms, assistant trainers, etc., but not just one, but two huge names that have joined the team. Kieran Fallon and Alex Solis are both, I don't know if Kieran's arrived yet, but are going to work and help you out getting ready for the Breeders' Cup. So tell me a little bit about their roles and why'd you bring in these guys to assist you going forward?
Well, these guys are, they go without saying what they've achieved in racing. And, I've got Julio Garcia, who I attribute a lot of my success to. He's just phenomenal when he breezes the horses in the mornings, and he can just do, I just tell him a couple of words. He knows exactly what I want. And he can get these real fast ones just to kind of switch off in the morning. And then that early surge that you see in the springtime, they can come about it late in the races to where you get that late surge and punch. Now with these other guys, with Alex Solis, who rode a lot of winners for me when I was training in California, as well as Kieran. Kieran initially, he was a great help when I initially went over to Royal Ascot. He was the one on the horses, and each and every year he gets on my horses over there, and he knows the lay of the land, and he knows which ones are the three he got on this year. Campanelle won, and the other two were second. So, it's just, and he came back over again this year, and he's gonna help me all throughout the course of the winter here and on to the spring. So I'm real glad to have both these guys with me.
Wesley, just one last question for me, and that is with regard to a horse of yours that won the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Turf Sprint last year, Four-Wheel Drive, who we ran against a couple of times, and I think Four-Wheel Drive was actually featured in the NBC piece on American Pharaoh. What can we expect from him coming back? It looks like he's just had a couple of published breezes, and where can we expect him to show up again in the entries?
Well, he's had a couple of nice breezes. We've got him nominated for the Breeders' Cup. It's a little bit of a long shot whether or not we'll enter him or run. Like to see one real nice breeze on the grass and make that determination. But unfortunately, we had some rain here the last few days that kept him out from the entries. I mean, from the workout on the turf. So we'll make that decision next week when he gets on the grass.
Wesley, I'd like you to call upon your experience as a jockey, former champion apprentice, and just chime in on the whip debate from your perspective, the changes that have been proposed, or from all across the spectrum, from New Jersey to various other sort of compromises. But where do you stand on the whip issue?
That's as a trainer, Julio himself, when he rides the horses, he very rarely goes to the stick that much, kind of taps him on the shoulder, and he'll kind of, in the horses that he rides for me, he generally can try to get the most out of them, but not more than he should. But at the same point, you'll see a lot of horses, if they do put these whip rules in place, that won't win that could have. So it's from a jockey standpoint, I see where they're coming from. There's a lot of horses that need encouragement and urging and reminders that they're going to be giving them. But from a fan standpoint and from a business standpoint, where we need new people to come in, visually doesn't look well. So I'm kind of like in between both. But I'm for the good of the game, and if that means, and unfortunately, horses that could win that can't because they need more encouraging, and we need our industry to keep growing. And so if they mandate those restrictions, then we'll have to adhere to it.
All right, one last question, and it's more of a philosophical question. You run your horses a lot, the fillies against the boys. Obviously, with 2-year-olds, their development is different than older horses. We talked to Ken McPeak a couple weeks ago about running Swiss Skydiver against the boys in the Preakness, and I think it takes a certain kind of personality to want to do something extraordinary, especially going to Royal Ascot and taking on all these big horses in Europe. Can you just talk about why you're willing to take those chances and step outside the box and do something that a lot of American trainers don't really want to do?
I took a lot of heat from him at first when I was running a lot of the 2-year-olds against the colts, 2-year-old fillies. But, I just think it's pretty easy. If you line a bunch of us up, and a bunch of them are women and a bunch of them are guys, and as far as if the women are faster than the guys you put them with, it's kind of easy to figure where you're at. I think a lot of fillies develop a lot quicker. If you look at the 2-year-old training sales, a lot of the faster times, the majority of the faster times will be fillies rather than the colts, and the colts will come on late. And I kind of like to take advantage of that. You also get a little bit of a weight break. Going years back when I used to ride for Charlie, he was one thing I'll always remember. He said that weight means a lot more in sprinters than they do route horses, which you would think it'd be the opposite. But a lot of these old timers that I used to ride for and really, really knowledgeable people, I everything they've told me, I was kind of like a sponge. It stuck to me in my mind. So, but majority of the time, if you have the fastest horse, they're gonna, especially with the sprints, and you break well, you're gonna win early on. And I'll zero in, and the faster ones come to a head real quick early in the spring, and that be a filly. I'm more apt to run them against the colts.
All right, Wesley, thank you so much for joining us. Best of luck in the Breeders' Cup.
Thank you. Appreciate it, guys. Thanks for having me on.
No problem. Anytime, man. See ya. The Green Group Guest of the Week is sponsored by The Green Group, an accounting, tax consulting, and advisory firm specializing in the thoroughbred industry. As this week's Green Group Guest of the Week, Wesley Ward will receive a free 1-hour tax consultation. The Green Group, proven strategies to save you taxes. Learn more at greenco.com. We'll be right back after this message from The Green Group.
The Green Group is widely recognized as the top-rated tax and accounting firm specializing in the horse business. Why do the top owners, breeders, pinhookers, and trainers trust the Green Group as their tax advisors? The difference is experience. Firm founder Len Green has over 4 decades of experience owning, breeding, and racing horses. First-hand knowledge gives Green Group clients proven tax and money-saving strategies. Visit the Green Group at www.greenco.com. The Green Group, proven strategies to save you taxes.
All right, so that's going to do it for this week's edition of the TDN Writers Room presented by Keeneland. Remember, the Keeneland Fall Meet runs through this Saturday, October 24th. I want to thank John Green, Bill Finley, Alan Carasso, our Green Group Guest of the Week, Wesley Ward, our producer, Patty Wolf, our editors, Aaliyah LaRocca and Danny Cipher. Thanks for watching. Wear a mask. We'll see you next week.